untrammeled terrain to make their fortune and, unwittingly, redefine the American dream from a steady grind of work and thrift to a gamble that favored the bold. The journey to the West Coast by ox or mule-drawn wagon was long and arduous in the 1840s, as gold seekers fought cholera, hostile Indians, and starvation. Voyages by sea could be perilous. In modern times, the way to prosperity was unimpeded. Adventurers drove, hitchhiked, or rode the train to the great land north. There was little of the speculative nature of past booms. Nobody wildcatted anymore. Companies knew where the oil was and had the technology to extract it. Newcomers were almost guaranteed to find a job, as long as they could pass a drug test, and if they couldn't, those were easy enough to fake. North Dakota was again at the whims of exploitive outsiders. A half-century after historian Elwyn Robinson claimed that the state's remoteness had established it as a colonial hinterland, dependent upon faraway markets. Journalists from around the world came to North Dakota, often for just a few days. I was one of them, traveling from Minneapolis to the oilfield for a week in 2012. Yet most news stories could never capture the reality of it. The Bakken defied mainstream explanations. That place was an outpost of outcasts and dreamers and geniuses, an unending paradox in what it meant to be American, a phenomenon that called for nuanced reporting that captured the hopeful and the dark and the absurd. North Dakota. What a wild frontier. Who were all these people rushing in, and why? I tried to imagine the civilization they would build and its trajectory when the frenzy went away, the things the pioneers would leave behind. How might the natives regulate mass industrialization when they were so resistant to government intrusions, so protective of their own liberties? Observers always said this would be studied in history classes a century from now, and history demands a book. I began going to North Dakota to pursue these inquiries more seriously in May 2014, stopping for gas near Fargo off Interstate 94, where there would invariably be some shifty-eyed man at the next pump over, probably just out on parole, and I would know, without either of us saying a word, that he was bound for the oil field 6 hours across the state. That look. Freedom, desperation, adventure, meth, money. It was perhaps the only time I would harbor a vague respect for a gas station ruffian. There was something so brave about heading out there that who one was mattered far less than that he was headed to the Bakken at all, and this was the truism that bound everyone. It was such a novel place, so inscrutable to those who'd never been, that the oil field remained a second-hand story even to inhabitants of the more populous eastern edge of the state. Farmers and barflies I met on the way out warned against going out there. Not that they had ever been, but they'd heard all about it. Seen it in other ways. Take Castleton, the little town where an oil train derailed in 2013, causing an inferno so tremendous that people could feel the heat through their windshields a half-mile away. The following year, oil began displacing the farmers' crops on the tracks, delaying their transport of grain. Warren Buffett can screw himself, several farmers told me, alluding to the billionaire's ownership of the Burlington North Santa Fe Railroad. They already had a dim impression upon hearing of oil workers who'd make $17,000 in a month or two, fly to Las Vegas, then come home broke and eat ramen noodles. And another fellow from Castleton, speaking of the supposed violence, "You wanted to go to a bar and have a beer. Physical assault charges are up, and someone's going to beat you up? You can go get a six-pack and sit home and watch Wheel of Fortune." One could travel there by taking the interstate all the way across North Dakota, then going up Highway 85, which formed the backbone of the oil field, and ran 1,479 miles from El Paso to the Canadian border. But to really understand the place, a traveler ought to make a series of northern and westerly turns from Jamestown and its iconic buffalo sculpture into long and green hollows of feral quiet that ran hundreds of miles. Get out in some smudge of a town like Harvey to fill the tank again, shiver in the eyes of stillness that beamed.